right, $29.6 trillion. That will be $30 trillion among friends. That is how much of your money and mine has gone directly to Western banks as a result of the financial meltdown as we subsidize a $700 trillion secret credit insurance gambling parlor they like to call the swaps market, so it confuses us. $29.6 trillion in direct lending, which does not include the indirect and massive costs of potential inflation and the ongoing rise in cost of commodities and food around the world that has doubled the cost of food for the poorest billion people that are on this planet. Keep that number in mind and now consider another one. 46.2 million. The number of Americans currently living below the poverty line who cannot find work because all the money in our country goes to subsidize credit gambling and trade deficits. That poverty number is the highest since the Census Bureau began counting. There will always be inequality in life and in any society. But this is not inequality. This is structural, bought, gross inequity. Which begs the question, is there no longer such a thing as a middle class? And is there permanently now this category of platinum citizens purchasing our government, extracting our nations, and enriching themselves, both in Western Europe and in America? Our specialist today explores that question in his recent piece in the National Journal titled The Left Behinds. Michael Hirsh is their chief correspondent. And Michael, how can any self-respecting leader in America or Western Europe stand before his or her people as a governor, as an attorney general, as a president, as a congressperson, a senator, or prime minister, and explain to them that providing $30 trillion in value to subsidize a financial system that does not invest in our country, that does not lend to our country, and that is depriving our country of the exact investment that we are desperate for to create jobs in health, energy, education, and infrastructure? How can any leader in the West stand before their people and justify the statistics that we just reviewed?
Because they don't want to talk about them. You're the first person, actually, I know who's put those two figures next to each other, and it is extraordinary. It really explains a lot that's happened over the last several years. The unreconstructed nature of Wall Street, the fact that Tim Geithner, the Treasury Secretary in the Obama administration, did not do anything to change the structure. It shows the extent to which Ben Bernanke, the Federal Reserve Chairman, had to go to rescue and put it on sort of artificial sustenance the Wall Street sector that had gone so out of bounds during the lead up to the crisis. And the fact that all of this trading is still going on, the swaps trading, derivatives trading.
It's still secret. It's just like the Citizens United money. It's the financial equivalent of Citizens United.
It has gone from $600 trillion in nominal trading up to $708 trillion. That was
since the president took over. So it was $600 trillion under Bush. Yeah. Under Barack Obama, his reform is to add $100 trillion.
That's according to Gary Gensler, who I just interviewed a couple of weeks ago about this. So it's really amazing. You're seeing all of this capital going to sustain a system that has remained unreformed despite bringing on the country and the economy the greatest catastrophe since the Great Depression, and which entire countries now have to hold huge amounts of capital in reserve to avoid the depredations of the big banks and Wall Street, the big financial firms, and yet nothing has changed, and you're seeing something similar in Europe.
Crystal?
Michael, we passed the Dodd-Frank financial reform bill, and we were told that now banks wouldn't be too big to fail, that we'd fix the problem. I mean, where did that effort go awry? What should have been in that bill that isn't, or what has gone wrong in the implementation?
Well, first of all, the bill itself was deeply flawed. They put something in there called resolution authority, force the big banks to fight, to create what they call living wills, which is, this is how you liquidate me if I go wrong. But implementing that has always been a difficult thing to imagine. Jerry Corrigan, who used to be with Goldman Sachs, actually still used to be president of the New York Federal Reserve, told me that never in the entire history of mankind has a large financial firm ever been unwound in an orderly way. It can't be done.
Is there any other potential reform to the financial system that does not include restoring capital requirements? Can you have a functioning financial system where you allow people to gamble without using their own money?
I mean, no.
Have you ever seen one? No. I've never seen one. All right, go ahead.
Well, you've written about some of the reformers who actually pushed on that effort to try to do some of what Crystal's talking about. Obviously, Senator Dorgan, who's now left, my old boss, Senator Cantwell. Tell us a little bit about where that fits into the balance of power, because sometimes people feel like there's nobody in Washington looking out for these interests. It seems like there were some, but they lost.
Look, there were a small group of senators, including Cantwell, Byron Dorgan, Bernie Sanders,
Sherrod Brown for a while.
Right, who were warning Barack Obama early on that he had to be tougher on Wall Street, that indeed he was really missing the boat. This was an opportunity to win the center, even win some of the right, because one of the things that went wrong in 2008 in the financial catastrophe that upset the right, conservatives, just as much as the left was that capitalism was corrupted by Wall Street. It wasn't working. The way
there were no capital requirements.
And, and you're supposed to fail when you screw up, right? That didn't happen, still hasn't happened. And so he had a chance at that time, the president, to really take them on. His Treasury Secretary, I think, and Larry Summers, who is then his chief economic advisor, didn't give him some very good advice. You had people fighting in the trenches like Senators Dorgan and Cantwell and Sanders, and in the end, even Al Franken actually added a couple of really useful provisions to Dodd-Frank.
And by the way, Senator Tom Coburn, there were conservatives, along with people like Senator Cantwell, who are capitalists, who know that the financial system must drive investment in our country in order to solve the problems of our country. Anyway, go ahead, Art.
Is the agreement that's coming up in Europe, do you think it's crafted better than the bailouts here? What do you see as the strength of it, and what do you see as the failures?
Well, I must say it is interesting that the one holdout is Great Britain, which wants to protect its own Wall Street, the City of London, which operates according to mainly the same rules. I will say that it was a very impressive performance by President Sarkozy of France. The Germans seem to finally get their act together. To little notice, Mario Draghi, the new head of the European Central Bank, was sort of acting as the German stalking horse on this, basically saying to everyone, look, you're not going to get any bond buying from me, the ECB, unless you agree to much tougher fiscal standards. So, we'll have to see how the markets react, but it does look like they've gone much farther than they have before. But none of this really changes the theme of what we're talking about here. You're talking about an unreconstructed financial system, giant banks that in some cases, in the case of Italy and Greece, actually got into trouble because of the derivatives that were sold to them by some of the big banks here, like Goldman Sachs.
And we're going to wrap it up, but the thing with these giant banks is not just that they're big, but because they don't have to use any capital to work, their incentive is to manufacture debt, not to create value. So you go to work every day, and the Citigroup, JP Morgan are basically giant debt-seeking machines, because if they don't have to create capital and they can insure debt, you just need to have debt to exist to insure it. Whereas if you have capital, you go to work to create value, because you want to manage that capital base. And right now we literally have a system that incentivizes the manufacturing of debt at the expense of our nation. All we can do is talk about it and raise the temperature, because we will end up with a global debt restructuring a la the Marshall Plan. It may not be this year or next year, but it's the only way out of the situation. And I thank you for helping us understand it better, Michael. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.